There's a point where you rise above the snow line. But now you're on a completely different kind of trip. A trip that can change fast. You think it's just hubris that gets us into these situations?
Oh boy, the front end looks unhappy.
I hope not. I hope it's a mix of experience, preparation, and planning. A headline caught my attention this week. A YouTuber had passed away. He was filming a solo adventure and had succumbed to the cold in a surprise blizzard. In fact, my YouTube algorithm seems to be full of people going on snow adventures and ending up in a little bit of trouble. It almost feels irresponsible at this point to make a snow adventure video without covering some of the risk. Winter adventures can be incredible, but you need a plan, and then you need several more contingencies for when your plan inevitably goes wrong. So here's the thing. I just got back from a snow camping trip where quite a few things went wrong for me, and I did end up stuck in a blizzard for a bit. I have no intention of over-dramatizing my experience. I just think it's really important for YouTubers to be honest about these things, be vulnerable, share their mistakes. I think we could all learn a lot if we weren't afraid to look a little bit foolish. So here's 5 key failures from my blustery snow camping trip. They range from the incredibly technical all the way to the absolutely boneheaded and just dumb mistakes that I definitely made. Oh, and actually, just to make it a little bit fun, I am going to show you a couple things that we did for this trip that worked really well, including a new Starlink setup, as well as a camping heater that actually just worked amazing. Okay, we're going to start with the humiliating ones, the really embarrassing ones. First thing I did not bring on the trip that I definitely ended up needing was a shovel. I actually have a shovel. I have this one. It folds out to a full-size shovel. It's actually one of the nicest shovels you can take on a snow trip. Problem is, I went on vacation the week before this trip, and this one went on that vacation in a different vehicle. So I didn't realize that I didn't have it. We ended up using shovels probably 4 or 5 times, and I sat around twiddling my thumbs trying to figure out how to look useful and not feel like a freeloader. Bring a shovel when you go on a snow trip, but probably more importantly, have a checklist. Have a checklist for a snow trip of all the things that you need, and right before you leave, go through your list and make sure everything actually made it in the car. And that might have a little bit of foreshadowing. I think that's the word, foreshadowing. That's the word I was looking for their next one. I checked the weather before I went on this trip, and we were kind of expecting some bad weather, some wind, some snow. There'd already been a whole lot of snow the week before. So when that happens in an area like Washington where there is a ton of trees, a lot of times you end up with trees down on the road, and you end up needing a chainsaw. So of course, I try to be a good Boy Scout, so I came prepared. I brought this chainsaw. I happen to love this one a lot because it's a 56 volt chainsaw, so it just has a ton of power and cuts faster than most of the other ones out there. It also comes in a 20-inch bar or a 22-inch bar, which is pretty big for an electric chainsaw. I have a spare bar for this in the truck. I have a spare chain for it. I have spare oil. The one thing that I didn't bring was the batteries. I know, I told you, these are the embarrassing ones. Got to get them out of the way. I left them all on the shelf charging because I wanted to make sure that I had plenty of power when I was on the trip. So this is one of the batteries. I actually have a couple of these. Again, that checklist probably would have come in handy. Okay, so this is the trip where I decided that I wanted to switch to electric cooking.
Good morning. All right, well, a couple of the things that we set up before we left on this trip have worked really well. Probably the number one simple one is the magnet mount on the roof for the mini Starlink.
This thing is magnetic. And it is a really good magnet, as you can see.
That's worked really well, which is awesome because I've taken it through a ton of trees and bushes. No issues there. And then if you look over here, we have the diesel heater is on a little table outside. And we have the controller for it inside here, where I can just hit it here. And that will turn it on. It actually has a thermostat. So it actually has a temperature controller right here. So it's set to 19 Celsius. And then it just will kick on all night. I actually usually run it for about 20 minutes and then power it down because it warms it up in here enough and I have a good enough sleeping bag that it's fine. It doesn't use a lot of fuel and it doesn't use a lot of battery. So I was able to run it pretty much most of the night last night and it was pretty great. I have the Bluetti battery pack plugged to where it's supposed to charge directly off the alternator. So you've got a cable that goes all the way to the battery. It's got an inline switch, almost kind of like a breaker. And all of that works fine, but it stopped charging the battery. So the bad news on that is that means I don't really have a way to recharge my battery pack. And when you're cooking with it, you use a ton of power. So I'm probably going to use somebody else's stove to boil some water this morning. But yeah, I'm just going to plug the Bluetti directly into the 12 volt. It charges really slow, but we'll be doing a lot of driving today. So that'll probably be enough power to get me through. This thing, this is from Bluetti. Bluetti sent me this whole setup. They're sponsoring this video. They sent me, this is the AC200. It's a 2048 watt battery pack that I've been playing around with. I liked it because it was extra big. And the thing is, when you're cooking, you use a ton of power. When I say a ton of power, I mean a ton of power. This thing is what I was using to cook. Now this is from a company called Stoke Voltics. So far I like this thing a lot, other than that the handle breaks. Watch how easy this is. This is why I wanted to convert to electric cooking. This is the base plate. You just plug it in right here. It's plugged into there. You can hear it. It just beeped, turned on. It can cook from anywhere from 200 watts to 1,000 watts. But if you're trying to like boil water, you have to do 1,000 watts or it takes forever. So basically you just stick that there. You take your pot, you stick it on top. That's it. Go right here, hit the button, turn it on, see 200 watts, pause. And then I can also turn this 400, 600, 800, 1,000 watts. Boom. So now this will get hot really, really fast. I just like the simplicity of just having this power strip right here, opening my tailgate, plugging this in, and cooking. No gas, no stove. So I left all that stuff at home. And that was a mistake.
You went into battle with an unproven rifle.
Well, it turned out that the unproven component of my electrical system ended up being my alternator. Now this is really sad because I actually installed the whole system in the car. I got in the car just like I am right now. I drove around, I pulled the app up on my phone, and it showed that it was working perfectly. The coolest thing about this charger is you can actually charge at 56 volts. So at 56 volts, you're going to charge that entire battery pack from 0 all the way to full in about 4 hours. But all I'm trying to do is top the thing up after using it for 1 day. So I could top the whole thing up in probably an hour to an hour and a half of driving, and it would have been the perfect solution for me. Not only that, you can see it on your phone. It tells you exactly what it's doing. But the problem that I ran into is I have an alternator that works just good enough to drive, but it turns out it's clearly about to die, which I'm very glad that I learned because I'm going to fix it before I go on a big trip and have this thing leave me stranded up in the mountains with a bad alternator. What we found out was if I'm accelerating really hard, like I am right now, my alternator's only generating about 13.4 to 13.6 volts, and it should be generating like 14 plus. Whenever I let off the gas and I'm not accelerating and I'm just kind of cruising, it would drop down to like 12.2 volts. Sometimes it even drop all the way down into the 11s. Well, the Bluetti's Charger 1 is smart. It tries to protect your battery and it tries to protect your car. So it only turns on if you exceed 13.4 volts. So it turns out 99% of my driving time, it's not on because I'm not exceeding the correct voltage for it to actually charge. So it's a pretty cool system. It's weird to write a review about a system when it actually didn't work very well for you on your trip. Now here's the remarkable thing. As soon as I realized I wasn't going to be able to charge, I flipped into the mode of conserve power as much as possible. That battery pack is so big that even though I was only at like, I think 44% once I realized I had a problem, I was able to ration out my use of power the rest of the trip, plug it into a normal 12 volt lighter, you know, cigarette lighter port that charges really slow. And I was able to get through the rest of the trip. I was still able to use heat at night. I didn't do a lot of cooking is the bottom line. I basically just ate a lot of food that was pretty boring, snacks and stuff that I had in my cooler. So I didn't cook anything nice for the rest of the trip. But other than that, the system works. I'm home now. I've been able to fix it, change everything out. Clearly, I can get this thing charging. I'm excited to use this in the future, but yes, of course, I'm probably gonna bring a little tiny backpacking stove just as a backup. And that's not a knock on Bluetti, that's just common sense. I can't believe I didn't do that. Don't be an idiot like me. Oh, and one more thing. If you're gonna do a system like this, clearly you should test your alternator. Make sure you don't have an alternator that's on the fritz. Okay, so this next one will be super, super fast. In here, I actually have a tire repair kit. I've talked about these a lot. Oh, you know what else I have in here? I have 3 pairs of rubberized gloves. Cold, when things get wet, you can get very cold, and then you can get very dangerous. So I always have spare gloves so I can rotate through and leave the other ones up on my dash where they get dried out from the defrost. Okay, so this tire repair kit is a very comprehensive one. I've had links to it before. People have bought this, they love it. Comes with spares for everything. It's really comprehensive. But this is what I ended up needing on this trip. This little guy right here has spare valve cores. Nate from Dirt Lifestyle, he was breaking trail. That is getting a little bit precarious. The high side is what you want. Ugh, I don't like that at all. Yeah, that is not wanting to grab at all. It's kind of hard to describe how not comfortable looking that is. We had gotten into some pretty tough snow actually. But since I was able to follow him, I'd only aired down to about, I want to say maybe 8 to 10 PSI. Somewhere around there. And that is not low enough if you're going to break trail on trails that are as hard as the one that we were on. We were trying to go over this pass. We were on a shelf road. It was basically blizzard conditions because the wind was going so hard, the snow was getting swept off the side of the hill and just getting thrown up the hill. So you couldn't really see when you got out of the car. And he asked if somebody else could step up and cut trail for a while. And he nominated me, which is great. I need the experience, and having somebody like him behind me to tow me out when I get stuck makes you feel good about learning in those conditions. At that point, I was losing traction, and every time I'd lose traction, I'd slide off the side of the road, and it was a steep, shelf road. So you'd ram the snow, and the butt end of your car would kind of hop over off the ledge. You'd have to back up about a foot, and then you have to ram it again and hop yourself back on. So it was pretty technical driving, and it became evident pretty quick that my tires weren't low enough. So we had to air down. We had to literally dig down to the valve stems and air down more. And in the course of doing that,
You got a valve core issue over here. It's
leaking
a little bit.
One of the valve cores became damaged. Well, that was fine. I had backups. For that purpose, though, in the middle of a blizzard, that is not the time you want to be doing any of that stuff. So we just stuck a really good cap from in here on it to stop the leak. It was a slow leak, and aired everything down to about 3 psi and kept plowing. So the lesson learned there, it's the same thing with four-wheel drive low. Don't wait until you get all the way into an incredibly technical problem where you are very stuck on the side of something really steep to try to shift into four low. You want to do that ahead of time. Same thing with your PSI. You want to get your PSI down low enough for the hard stuff before you're on the hard stuff. I know this. It's a rookie mistake. I tell people this all the time, and I still find myself sometimes sitting in my comfort zone too much and doing it. Okay, so I'm going to show you the last embarrassing thing that I did wrong, and then I'm going to show you 2 really quick mods that we did to the truck that were awesome for this trip. So this vehicle has 312,000 miles on it. It is a 1997, and it still has the original taillights in it. And we ended up getting stuck on that shelf road where we could not go any further. There was too big of a snowdrift. Every time I'd go forward 3 feet, I would slide off the side and have to get back on and go again. And it was late, it was dark, and as I said, the weather conditions were terrible. So we decided that we had to call it, which meant we had to back all the way down that shelf road in the dark. Well, I have awesome lights on the front of this, off-road lights, great, all the cool stuff, but I have nothing back here. These do work. My backup lights work, but they are not nearly bright enough to try to back up down a shelf road in the middle of the night in the middle of a blizzard. Learn from my mistakes. Now I'm going to show you a couple really quick things that I actually did right that worked out really well, and we're going to start with communications. So when you're going on a trip like this, communications is really important. If something really does go wrong, you need to be able to signal for help. There's 2 things. Sometimes people think because they can signal for help, they don't need to worry about being responsible. That's not true. In the case recently where somebody actually didn't make it, they actually did signal for help, and they had communications. And they talked to help, and help said, okay, we're going to get out there, but we have to wait out the storm. And they were out there the next morning to help them, and they didn't survive the night. So just because you have good communications, remember, you got to also have a plan to stick around long enough for the help to get to you. So I actually have an inReach in the back of the truck. That's my emergency. But then I also have Starlink up on the roof up here. And the cool thing about Starlink is these guys sent me, I'll put a link and their information down below, but they sent me a new cord. So first of all, I hate the old cord because it would always get tangled, and it was 1,000,000 miles long. This is a nice thick cord that doesn't tangle easy like the other one. It plugs into 12 volt instead of normal house plug. So I just have a 12 volt plug right here on the side of the door where I can plug it in. And I don't even drill it through the door. They lined it so thick, it's protected well enough, so I can just close it. I just close it in the door. Now, the coolest part is the actual case that came with it. The case, climb up here, is magnetic. So I test a lot of different vehicles, and I go on a lot of different trips. I only have, obviously, 1 Starlink dish. I didn't want to permanently mount. Everybody was trying to send me these mounts that permanently mount to your vehicle, and they're too big of a pain to take on and off. This thing is magnetic. And it is a really good magnet, as you can see. It has this 3D printed case that you put it in, and then it just magnetizes to your roof. So now I can move it between here and the Tundra and other vehicles that I'm testing and using. So this is my primary way for safety to keep communications open everywhere I go. But let's say I don't have enough power to power this. Then I have my backup, and my backup is my inReach. So this was really fun. Sometimes I used to just stuff it up inside of my sunroof, but then the cord would be hanging down on your head, and it would also make a whole lot of noise up there. This thing was awesome, worked perfect. And it's not expensive either. So if you're looking for a Starlink mount and you want to even be able to move between vehicles, that thing was a huge improvement over what I have been doing. Okay, so let's talk about the last thing. This is the diesel heater I was talking about. This thing is this is the best one I've tested so far. I used the Viver one a couple years ago. It worked awesome 3 times and then it died. Never worked again. I don't know what broke, it just broke. So this is the one, before I even went on this trip, I ran it for 8 hours straight one night just because I didn't believe that it would just keep working exactly how it was supposed to. And somehow it actually did. So this is one from a company called LF Bros. This is not sponsored, by the way. These guys are not paying me to say good things. This is just 100%. I was actually so happy to find one that worked. I figured I would share. This is their camping one. They have different editions of it. The different editions, they all look pretty similar in my opinion. It seems like they come with a lot of different accessories. The one thing I loved about this one is it came with all of this stuff. So it comes with all the hoses that you need instead of having to go find these at a hardware store. It comes with all different types of vents for different applications. It comes with all these cool rings to be able to do different things with. Of course, you got your muffler. It has a bunch of different wiring options. So instead of having to go figure out how to wire it different ways, it has 12 volt. It has multiple types of 12 volt, and then it even has a normal plug for just plugging into an actual power port. So I can use the Bluetti to power it very easily. That's one of the things that made me the most happy is a lot of the 12 volt ones, basically when they turn on, it's kind of like a diesel truck. It has a glow plug to fire it up. It uses a ton of power, and when it's using all that power, it basically a lot of times, your whatever 12 volt system you have is not giving it enough power, and it won't work. It'll shut off. And what I've seen is sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't, and it gets really annoying. So this one, they actually sent with this power adapter. So I just have it hooked up this way, and I told you I routed an actual cord up here. So I just plug it in right there. We made this metal plate that fits right into the sliding window space. And we even made it to where it has the same exact type of latch right here that the car had. So this window actually latches into this metal plate. And all we have is we have our little portal. And we can unscrew our portal. And then we run our hose from the diesel unit over here up to this portal. So the cool thing about that is I was able to, remember I had the whole power disaster where I didn't have a lot of power to use, so I had to ration power. So I was able to set the thermostat really, really low using this control panel right here. And then I didn't waste a ton of power all night. So I'm a big fan of this thing. This setup with the chair coming right off the side of your tire worked great. Diesel heater up above the ground. I would put the exhaust straight off the side here, and then I would run the intake for the actual air that this brings in. I would run it in behind my tire. So even with the wind swirling all the exhaust around here, I wasn't getting any of the exhaust coming in through the intake. Anyway, I would check out that diesel heater if you're in the market for one. It's, like I said, company called LF Bros. Pretty cool. You're gonna need a power pack. You can use something like the Bluetti to run it off of and charge off your alternator. It's a pretty good setup. It's a really good setup if you like to go snow camping.